It's very difficult, even spectacularly difficult, to comment meaningfully on Hybridzania Yojimbo. You see, I will try. I think it's something I might be able to handle. But you have to remember that um, when I tried to contribute to an understanding of how I ended up with 2 packs of cigarettes in my post office box and then a pack of gun smoke at the time of T-Bag Shaker's murder, that it led to the homicide of a completely innocent person because of her name, who had no more to do with it than I did. It was a tip off about cooperating with people who are psychopathic. Um, and in Hybridzania, you have a situation where people are just dealing with shadows. And target A and target B, they might leapfrog by doing target A to give them a pretext to get to target B, when the whole purpose was to get to target B. And it was the same gang both times, but it looks like an exchange of gunfire. That's what Yojimbo is about. Now, there's a bizarre moment in the ruling class where 2 men come out think they have magic powers, and they start hurling lightning bolts at each other. This is the battle the wizards of Peter Gabriel brought on when he put me on that voice again. He created an invisible dummy to play off of for Hybridzaniac warfare. Now, very interesting problem arises when you look at the Nord Stream. The Nord Stream clarifies that America and Russia are terribly at odds. My personal opinion is that it's likely the United States was behind it. I don't really believe that the Russians had any particular reason to do it. But I do know that Trump and the Russian high command have pulled some fast ones, possibly with the help of Biden. There was a worldwide revolving bookcase decision to release COVID, and the Ukraine preamble swept that under the carpet. It doesn't mean it's any less serious of a conflict. It is seemingly an ultimatum. So when you ask me my opinion about these things, it seems to me like innocent bystanders are being picked off to prevent me from talking. There was the logic of Tupac getting revenge or Tupac's fans getting revenge, but that's not necessarily what happened. It may very well be that the same people who killed the girl were behind Tupac, and they just wanted to make it look like there was a semblance. You see, the way that Hybridzaniac Yojimbo works is they reach in the shadows to look for people's presumptions and then establish a semblance. They call it clearing the air. They call it clearing the air. Take one of the dudes who was going by SpongeBob. He was the one who introduced the phrase "clearing the air." He was hanging out with Lister and schizophrenic chat. Lister like Listerine, and then they poisoned me in the mouth for COVID. Right? There's a Lister school over here in Jay Inslee's in Tune So when we're dealing with administration, I mean, the psychopathic warden in the state of Washington actually seems to think that a threat, a very salient threat, surrounding a deaf person who now has Parkinson's, who's been tortured for squawking, threatening to inject them to satisfy the Licky Jobs franchise of the Green Party who murdered my father, is penal harm for looking at perfectly civilized adult imagery that has been cleared by the great censor myself, and not to be shared with anybody. It's just a way of keeping safe and healthy and psychologically fit. So there's a very grand parana behind the criminal insanity of a union that played both sides to the Hollywood talking box. My whole point is that some of these things you would say, and I think it's probably fairly reasonable, that Russia and the United States, are you saying that Russia and the United States secretly colluded in the destruction of the Nord Stream? The both of them did that. I am among those who more or less rule that out. I don't think, however, that the fact that it was an antagonistic operation means that they didn't collude in bringing about the conflict in the Ukraine. It just means it was an ugly act by one side against the other after they started the uh, perimeter in the Ukraine, because what they're gunning for is silencing of history. They're both gunning to silence history. They're trying to make it too dangerous to narrate what took place. They're trying to make it too dangerous to have newspaper journalism saying that COVID was behind the scenes agreement by people who had acted rashly for many decades in promoting a Cold War. The Cold War machinery that existed on both sides led them to agree to extreme measures, is what I believe. Now, when you solve things on a case by case basis, you have to realize that your confidences are violated by journalism. Journalism is about communicating to the public, and the public is incapable psychologically of getting out of the Fern Hollow bridge gangs mentality. As a result, they secretly cheer Hybridzania Yojimbo. In other words, Tupac's fans hear that a white girl was killed and they cheer it. They don't say to themselves this was a double homicide. There's a narrative that doesn't fit. That it was both the Green Party's white people and black people who agreed to do both of them. That they went back and forth, swinging the pendulum in what they call Operation Clear the Air. It's a semblance. What they want to do is settle that they did the AIDS and COVID monstrosities. And we're going to all just sit back and say, okay, we're not going to ever put that into the history books. We are going to put them into the history books. Here it is. It's in the history books now, right? Okay. Should we consider the possibility that Russia and the United States colluded in the Nord Stream? Well, if they were concerned that people realized it was cahooters, the Trumpy-tune Kissinger or Putin were saying, let's do this to get people on board one side or the other, and then we'll settle it down for the New World Order. They might have colluded in doing it. I don't really know that they did that. But it is reasonable that they would consider the Nord Stream expandable if they thought it was necessary to perpetuate the delusion that they were not planning ultimately to divide the spoils up between each other. What I think we should do, in my personal opinion, is follow the aspects of the Russian narrative that are favorable and honorable, which is to settle down and make peace in the Eastern Donbass and have a neutrality and multi-layered sovereignty in that area. and investigate the neocons and their tendrils of profiteer that might have gone on behind the scenes. It seems to have gone on behind the scenes, in fact, in this revolving bookshelf, this secret room behind the revolving bookshelf that involved all of Trump's council dictators and cost us our grannies. You see, what they're doing with me is a secret embezzlement. I was a symbol of America, and they put me somewhere in a backwater so that only the plotters knew what was going on with me. And they knocked me out knocked me unconscious. And then they began to dragoon me with phenomenon from the great society world of the leapfrog lineage. So to tune me in slowly but surely to awareness that bats in the belfry, Roger Waters, and Trumpy Putinese know all about me. You know, I'm like one of their secret hobbies. And they see me as, because my father wrote a book called America's Stake in Human Rights. They were like, har, 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 har. Let's see what kind of rights human beings have. You'll see they'll be picking your pockets and stealing from you, queer ball. Nobody believes in human rights. And this is their idea of a practical joke. It's a practical joke. In other words, the people who did it probably killed Alina Shaykat. I don't doubt that there's a whole bunch of really monstrous garbage that goes through people's minds when something like that happens. Oh, good, they took out a white for a black. Oh, no, the boxing match mentality. But it's just a practical joke by this inner elite. In my opinion, that's highly likely. Even if they convinced the person that did it, it was race revenge. It really wasn't. If you look at the way I was entrapped, okay, in the one night stand that led to Obama's obsession with two virgins pussy ball over in Maduri Goto. It wasn't even what they said it was. It wasn't crossing the race line. It wasn't adultery. It certainly wasn't a Louis adultery. And the brains behind it was a white man, a despicable administrative white man who was parochial and they wore the stamp of the German Green Party. How many Germans are black people? Oh, they're honorary black people because Ralph Proctor thinks a mountain of ugly German swastikas is honorary the African ancestor symbols. I mean, it gets so ridiculous. You know, take off your spinner beanies and reboot yourselves to understand that the reason why ancient Greece evolved into the United States of America is because we wanted to establish a system of justice that was based on evidence, not on two virgins, Yojimbo, Hybridzania. Now, I don't think it's reasonable to ignore specific casework. It's not reasonable to just say, oh, this one's not important, this one is important. But you should look at the cases that come along squarely as time permits. It's not necessarily everybody's responsibility to solve problems, but you should learn to admit that you don't know when you don't know. And they have these guys working with Oliver Stone, like Cyril Wecht, who writes these bizarre books called things like Grave Secrets, where he tells tall tales about John Bennett Ramsey. I mean, the people who conjured John Bennett Ramsey out of the magician's hat were the same people who wrote T.M.O. DeJohn's Secrets of the Archetypes, the Gragian Society. And Weck's not going to let on about that because he's part of their long-term project. You know, how many people could possibly say that there's some reason for killing Cersei Kennedy? Nobody in the right mind would believe that. Nobody in the right mind would believe that there's any reason for killing the girl who died in Russia. Nobody in the right mind. I mean, so it's absurd. It's absurd logic and unhealthy logic to dehumanize people into these constructs that the Grangian society call archetypes. Now, if you can't shake that free, you're never going to be able to create a meaningful civilization. They're just going to keep acting out the worst in yourselves because big media has hijacked you to think that's justice. It's not justice. Justice is getting along with each other on a daily basis. Justice is innocent until proven guilty. Justice is knowing some restraint when it comes to the tensions and frustrations that are perfectly normal. I learned that at the governor's school. They said, get used to frustration, get used to it. These people are calling themselves clearing the air on settlements when they're doing nothing constructive whatsoever. They're fanning the flames of disaster and stupidity. Now, that's the reality. This invisible psalmist of sedlences that comes from Peter Gabriel's real world is a con job. I mean, people, Claire Daly has called out the German Green Party for their extreme right wingism. This explains that. She says, I can't understand it. This explains that. It's coming from Yoko Ono. It's a revenge, a private, little despicable deception that came out of World War II, getting even with somebody who they said symbolized the Hiroshima bomb. You got to be kidding me. I wasn't even born. Well, this is the sort of stupidity you're going to get with these spinner beanies. And I think you should get your head screwed on so you realize that. Stop. Yeah, there's nothing that can be done to logic out the way that the Seattle queers back their own assassins. There's nothing that can be done to logic it out. It just has to be stopped and the narration replaced with the truth. And there's nothing else that can be done. It's like you can rescue the situation by telling the truth, and they refuse. It's like if you're offered the antidote to a terrible disease, you should take the antidote to a terrible disease. They're dealing with a mindset that has perpetuated all of this catastrophe, and they should stop it. That's the bottom line. They should stop it. And they're not going to get any other response out of me because I know how it operates. There's enough evidence for Hybridzania Yojimbo that it doesn't matter what happened to the Nord Stream in light of the other evidence. I don't think that the Nord Stream was sabotaged by Russia. I find that very unlikely. But it might be that, Biden's gang decided that the case was getting too hot, so they throw a bone to those who want to continue with the deception of the parameter structure they developed to sweep COVID under the carpet, which is what that's about, in my humble opinion, is what I believe. I tried to be helpful to Tupac, and I think because he was a fellow human being and it was brought to my attention what seemed like a dare. I don't like these kinds of operations. I don't know who's picking on me. I think it's administration of warlocks and a struggle of the magicians that stretches back to Diaghilev in the 1910s. He was a man with as many arms as two octopuses. Siamese twin of octopuses. Two of them were Picasso, two of them were D'Annunzio. He had Gurdjieff and Uspensky working with him. Prokofiev was working with him, and he's virtually invisible. There's almost no biography you can get your hands on about him. But he was the grand central station of the entire situation that we're dealing with, the hot wiring mechanism of Axis Green Party sympathies that comes through the back door of Hollywood and tells us, oh, we're the Black Panthers. It's absurd. The whole thing is absurd. And if you don't get it together to evaluate it properly for what it is, you're going to end up absurd people.